Monica, and engineer Eugene Oki. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as we proceed, when I'm finished with the names, I will have the need to recognize some of us amongst all the distinguished guests here. But at this point in time, according to the program, we should be viewing the celebrant's profile, more of a visual. So I think it's time for us, maybe it would be beautiful to have this place deemed. Let's have the cinema feel. So whoever is in charge of the light can take this down, and let's have the celebrant's video presentation. Now, in case you don't know, the celebrant, this event is put together a public lecture with the theme, The Role of the Church in Nation Building, in honor of our great father, whose birthday officially will be on Tuesday next week. He's going to turn 60 officially, Reverend Dr. Chris OARHE. Let's enjoy the video.
Zebe Christopher OARHE is a multifaceted individual whose contributions span across educational, business, leadership, and religious spheres. In education, he has founded thriving primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions, showcasing his commitment to nurturing future generations. He is the president of Hilltop Leadership Institute, Hilltop Academy, founding chairman of the board of Hilltop Group of Schools, a master trainer accredited by the Center for Management Development of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, certified by the International Due Diligence Organization USA, a John Maxwell Master Trainer, and other globally acclaimed training bodies, a chartered accountant from the Institute of Company and Commercial Accountants of Nigeria. He is the president of DCSA Consulting, Faithwave Publications, and other enterprises. He exemplifies excellence in both personal, ministry, and professional endeavors. As the general overseer and lead pastor of the Hilltop International Christian Center in Port Harcourt and Hilltop Churches in Nigeria and her global expressions, he brings a wealth of experience in leadership and spiritual guidance. A sought-after speaker, teacher, and writer with a wealth of knowledge and skill acquired across a wide range of demanding roles. Chris OARHE has consistently demonstrated a prolific teaching ministry and effective contribution in directing a successful people-focused team, particularly interested in faith, effective education, economic processes, financial systems, leadership, and globalization. He seeks to empower individuals in the pursuit to recognizing, maximizing, and utilizing their God-given potentials. Friend Izebe Chris OARHE's academic background and optometry from the University of Benin, Benin City, Nigeria, and his brief stint in professional practice provides a solid foundation for his diversified career. He is armed with over 2 decades of experience in apostleship, pastoring, leadership, education, management, entrepreneurship, coaching, and mentoring. He is the president of Chris OARHE Ministry, by which he spearheads a high-caliber media outfit with a heavy emphasis on people's development spanning the globe. He is a TV and radio presenter of widely viewed programs, an author, motivational speaker, and life coach, ECOWAS Outstanding Personality Award winner, and other awards. He has traveled extensively within the African continent and around the world in passionate pursuit of the vision to raise leaders, the model Christ. He is married to Dr. Stephanie OARHE, the acclaimed relationship and marriage coach, and they are blessed with 4 children. Chris OARHE is a prolific author with numerous faith-based and personal development books. His earlier works includes More Than Conquerors, How to Build Strong Faith, Breaking Beyond the Growth Barrier, Speak Your Way to Success, and Move Your Mountains. He also authored devotionals and prayer guides such as Today in His Presence, Praying with Your Pastor, which focuses on daily spiritual growth and corporate prayer alignment. Amongst his more recent and widely recognized publications is Financial Intelligence, Unlocking Financial Wisdom for Money Mastery and Personal Prosperity, which teaches financial stewardship, Wealth Creation Principles and Kingdom-Based Prosperity, which was launched early 2025. In addition to these, he has announced or referenced upcoming and leadership-focused works such as Strategic Leadership, Business Leadership Mastery, My Business, Money, and My God, Generational Wealth Creation, Understanding Kingdom Prosperity, and 60 Laws of Success. His writings generally combine biblical theology and practical leadership, business wisdom, financial insight, and personal development strategies.
Prayer initiates revival, but books sustain revival. Many of the things that is driving us now, inspiring us, fueling our passion, came as a result of our encounter with books. Presently, at these 60 years of my life, I presented last year, I presented Financial Intelligence, a book that is designed to help people develop the basics of financial intelligence. It's an exhortational book to draw people back to consider winning in the financial arena. But this year of my 60th birthday, I'm trusting God that I'll be able to present a few books, but I can tell you now categorically, I have 30 titles ready. I have pilot copies for 27 titles. Pilot copies. Books are finished, is ready for the press. One of the flagships of my 60th birthday celebration will be the book 60 Laws of Success by OARHE. And I'm trusting God that God will use it to inspire many. Each law corresponds with 1 year. So he gives us 60 laws. I'm hoping that many people will have the book in their hands and it will be an inspiration to them. Life, the Bible says, is going to be even as your soul prospereth. So one of the titles that we're going to present very soon during this birthday will be the title of Soul Healing. And I'm believing God that it will transform so many lives and the destinies will be better for it. The Church of Jesus Christ is the last hope of God. If the church fails, God has no other, there's nothing else God can hold on to with which to transform the world. Unfortunately, many Christians either they don't know or they don't believe that. Even Christian leaders, I've heard people make jabbing statements and careless statements that the church is dead, the church is useless, the church is this. But God does not think so. God thinks that the world needs help. And the best help that the world needs is the church. So no matter how battered we are, no matter how rough, uncultured, untrained we are still God's last hope. So we better pick up ourselves and begin to pay attention to the assignments that God has given us. So if the nation is going to change, she needs the church. If the church will not take up the responsibility of being involved in the leadership of society and stand aloof and be pointing fingers and complaining, nothing is going to change. We are the light of the world. We are the salt of the earth. Salt cannot season soup outside the soup. If you want the soup to be seasoned and sweetened and influenced by salt, salt must enter into the soup. It is not just one component. No. The role of the church means the church is de facto. It's like the scripture says that the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. The gates of hell shall not prevail against his church. See, the church is at the vanguard of conquering the gates of hell. And the gates of hell does not have the power to stop the advance. So if the nation is going to be transformed, the leadership of the nations will have to be transformed. And everything rises and falls on leadership. So the church must take her leadership role. It must be at the vanguard of leadership. And then we'll now begin to see the transformation trickle into the nation. The salt will start sweetening the soup. The light will start lighting the society. Jesus speaking said, he said, the harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Then he said, pray ye to the Lord of the harvest so that he can raise laborers for the harvest. What laborers? Leadership. But there are a people called the church that God is depending on to provide leadership that will save the world and the nation from this calamity.
This is while the Hilltop International Christian Center is saddled with the responsibility of raising leaders that model Christ.
That was a beautiful one. Please, a round of applause for our Father in the Lord. Happy 60th birthday. I'm tempted to have us, this is off record now, I'm tempted to have all of us just sing a happy birthday song just for a few seconds to him, because Tuesday will be his birthday. Let me lead it. Happy birthday to you. Everybody say. Everybody say. Birthday to you. Thank you very much. Congratulations to you, sir. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, apart from public speaking and radio presentation as a journalist, I'm also a singer, a gospel singer. I'm proud about that. My song just dropped 4 weeks ago, and it's on all platforms. Maybe you can help me stream them, but later, that's not for now. But ladies and gentlemen, we have an important segment. At this point in time, permit me for the keynote address. Let me welcome Professor Pat Utomi. Ladies and gentlemen, from the Lagos Business School.
Let's be seated. Thank you all so very much. What a great pleasure to be in Port Harcourt. I have come here quite often in the course of my 70 years. And I love Port Harcourt. Actually, my family is a Port Harcourt family. My grandfather built a house on Bende Street in 1929. So, I do know Port Harcourt. But I'm even more pleased to be here because of the reason that we have come. I have to admit that the celebrant was not so much within my Periscope's cover until quite recently. And I was very happy with the reports that I got. Thank you for being of good report. And a very, very happy birthday to you. Before we proceed, I just want to join you in prayer. In praying that prayer that you prayed there and that you preached. You know, he said to his followers, all of us, occupy until I come. Those who help form others so that they know that we are supposed to be witness, that we're supposed to have this aroma of Jesus in our world, should know that God made a promise to Noah that because of the aroma of his altar, that he will not destroy the world the way that he did before. He is willing to say that he will not do to Nigeria what Nigeria has coming to it because of the aroma that will flow from your altar and from many altars. I want to say that being asked to speak to this subject set me off in all kinds of directions in terms of how to frame it. Because this is a subject I could speak to for 9 hours without stop. And I did not want to inflict any such thing on you. So I had to make a choice. And so, in starting out to make a choice, I essentially had to think through some temptations I had. You know, this is a season of temptation. And Jesus went out into the desert and prayed. After 40 days, the devil came. The devil always comes. And tempted Jesus. I was tempted in so many ways when I got the topic to discuss. And so I thought I should begin by looking at the temptations that I had to deal with. And hope that I will be delivered from my temptations. If we can get the slide presentations to go up, I can begin to speak to some of those temptations. But one thing is clear. Our world has made the progress that it has made significantly because of Christianity. And it will travel further because of Christianity. The challenge we have is how we all recognize that we are the church and how we make ourselves available to be instruments in getting to that place where our country should be. And so we speak to the church in nation building. And the temptations of the season, like I say, include the temptation to track this whole subject academically, to look at the impact of Christianity in nation building, in human civilization. I can tell you that on that subject, just trying to look at it as an academic, I can write a couple of books that can keep you struggling. Some of the ones I've read that I was wondering, my brain is too small to understand. And as I was trying to reflect on it, I just turned in my study, and there was a row of books on how Christianity built Western civilization. A row of books. And I thought, I don't want to try that. Go the way of making it an academic conversation. So I said, I need help to resist this temptation. Another temptation that then came at me was to play the public intellectual. You can chastise the church and everybody. And my friend, PLO Lumumba, the Kenyan public intellectual, would speak to it, talk like Martin Luther King Jr. So the temptation to play public intellectual on the subject was very high. But I knew that there was something deep inside the request for this to be the topic. I was more than feel good that the public intellectual can leave you. And then there was even a greater danger. The danger to play pastor. there's this thing on the internet, a church somewhere in the U.S. that advertises itself is front of the church. You see it there. Here, we teach you to live your life so that we don't have to lie at your funeral. Have you ever gone to those funerals? And they are preaching, and you tell somebody, is it that person that we know that they are preaching about? They say, you don't speak ill of the dead. So they have to say those nice things. But when it's not about the person. And that is why I love Stephen R. Covey, the great personal effectiveness guru. And one of my favorite moments was sharing a podium, something I got to do twice with him before he passed. And Stephen Covey, in advising you on how to live life, says you should begin with the end in mind. And he uses as illustration a funeral. Where the man is lying there, as we say in Nigeria, in state. And people are filing past. I say, think what these people are thinking about the man who has died. Not what they say, because they will be saying all those nice things. But somebody saying, that stupid man, God don't get up. Finally, he don't go. More peace on earth. Think what the people are thinking of this person who is lying in state. And when you get there, assume that you are the one there. And ask yourself, what do you want people thinking when they're filing past when you are the one lying there? And then live life to get that result. I could also play the journalist. I was trained as such. A critic who presents you a critique of the failings of the church to play the role that is bride. Jesus intended it to play in building society, community, the nation. And I could draw some ovations and all of that. Still, that temptation did not seem to me to be one that will make the thinking I thought may be in the head of those who crafted the topic. And so I said, I reject Satan. Okay, so could be a rally. Get all of you up. Mobilize authentic Christian witness. And that is also tempting to do. I still rejected that. At a point in time, I said, okay, well, let me just let the Spirit have free reign. And that is where I am. But factually, if you look at how human progress has taken place in the last 2,000 years, you cannot but recognize a direct intervention of the church in how that progress has taken place. A few years ago, I was teaching a class, and I wanted to illustrate business ethics and people management, how you treat people. And in doing a little research, I discovered a very early document of the first Christian century, the Didache. It's spelled Didache, but it's pronounced Didache. A Greek word meaning the writings of the 12 apostles. And in the Didache, it is said that any bishop that accepts oblation from a man who does not treat his workers well, let him be anathema. First Christian century. the church began to define the values that the world should have. The writings of the 12 apostles. In more recent times, because I said there from Digidahe to Rerum Novarum. In more recent times, as human society was going through transformation and the industrial revolution began to rise, capitalists in their desire to just have it all managed somehow to forget that man was human. People were treated like chattels in factories. You die, toss him aside, bring another one. What mattered was capital. The philosophers like Karl Marx began to write in protest of the emerging culture. And a pope called Leo the 13th. And that's why when this current pope was elected and took the title Leo the 14th, the first one, since that one, it raised some interest in people. Leo the 13th wrote a long letter called an encyclical on the industrial society and the dignity of the human person. It was called Rerum Novarum. And he set up a tradition in the Catholic Church, for example, of what is called the social teachings of the church, which deals centrally with the issue of man in society and how an ordered world should proceed. 10 days or so ago in Abuja, the Catholic bishops had their conference and they issued a literal State of the Nation report. It is a flow from that tradition. But in more clear ways, academics have argued about what makes for human progress. And so what I would like to do is just draw from some of those central issues that make for human progress and show how they have flowed out of Christian teaching. Today, dominant thinking coming from whether it's history, economics, or political science, a sense that central to why some countries have made progress materially and others have failed is the role that institutions play. Institutions and economic performance. One of the biggest influences in my academic work is a gentleman called Douglas North. In 1990, Douglas North wrote a book titled Institutions, Institutional Change and Economic Performance. In 1996, I was invited. I was spending a year of sabbatical at the Harvard Business School. And I was invited to the Hoover Institution at Stanford. And I was walking down the corridor, and suddenly I nearly had an apparition. Because walking towards me was Douglas North, who was spending a year of sabbatical. And I had consumed North, with such a gusto that seeing him, and he turned out to be a rascal. And began to chat with me. I've been invited to give a talk by a Nigerian scholar called Diamond, Larry Diamond, the Hoover Institution. essentially, Douglas North and a series of academics, including my own head of department in grad school, Eleanor Lee Nordstrom, who, by the way, went on to become the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics, had built a tradition of looking at institutions as what really has separated those who have won from those who have not won in human history. How has the church contributed to institution building? That's part of what we will engage. And in doing that, we'll look at it in the context of how in Nigeria today, we are doing everything to destroy the institutions that can make for progress, and how the church is reacting to that. And by the way, the closing part of this conversation will be using River State as a case study. So institutions have been considered very, very important in human progress, but also equally important culture, because values shape human progress. In fact, and indeed, back in the late 90s, there was a colloquium at Harvard that was built on a remark by a former Harvard professor who became a U.S. senator. He was such a sage when I was in grad school back in the 70s. I mean, turning to C-SPAN to watch him in the Senate was more important than going to class for me. His name was Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And it was Moynihan who made a statement when he was asked what the difference was between Republicans and Democrats. He said, well, you see, Republicans are conservatives. Democrats are liberals. And there is a central truth that governs how they see the world. He said, the central conservative truth is that it is not politics, but culture, your values, that determine the progress of a society. But the central liberal truth, and by the way, Moynihan was a liberal, is that politics can change a culture and save it from itself. In effect, Moynihan was saying that the reason American politics looks like there is no wide gulf is because in the final analysis, they all believe that values make for human progress. But Republicans believe that if you just preserve your ethics, your family values, and all of those things, the progress will come. But Democrats believe that you can engineer it. You can engineer culture. If you did affirmative action, for example, you can engineer culture. But in the final analysis, it is culture that still is responsible for human progress. And so we'll speak to culture and values in Nigeria and how the church supports, builds up, or does not build up the kind of culture that will make for consistent progress in our country. Because where the world stands is a function of the culture of the years that the church has essentially helped society to develop. Please, if you've gone too far, go back 2 more slides or so. 1 more slide back. So, thank you. In therefore talking to the very important points of the role of institutions in development, the role of culture in development, I will speak to leadership because people don't even seem to understand why leadership is important. Fundamental reason why leadership is important is because culture makes for human progress and leadership sets the tone of culture. That is the primary things leaders do. You cannot have a leadership class, an elite, that lacks character and hope to have progress. It will not happen. Because the progress will come from culture, and culture stone is set by the leaders. There is a school not too far from here in OARHE, Government Secondary School, OARHE. They have a motto that I believe was taken from one of Billy Graham's speeches back in the whatever 40s, 50s or what. And their motto is simply work hard, play hard. When wealth is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. When character is lost, all is lost. Amazingly, teaching about 25 years ago at the Lagos Business School, I used to illustrate that motto by pointing to some life experience. There was a very wealthy man, a billionaire in the United States, who went broke. And he was coming out of a subway in New York and saw some homeless guy. And he looked at the homeless guy and said, my goodness, that guy is worth much more than me. At the very least, he's worth zero. I am worth far less than zero. He had gone bankrupt. A few years later, he was back a billionaire. And I like to tell you that that man, is a video, I played it in class, of him saying that. That man is today the President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump. And then there was this chap who founded this great IT company we call Apple, Steve Jobs. As creative as you could possibly be, was so rich he could own everything he wanted on this planet if you want anything material. And at 50, he was dying. When health is lost, something is lost. But when character is lost, unfortunately, that's where our country is standing. When character is lost. But thank God that he has the capacity, the disposition to do what he does very well: forgive and provide a new lease of life. The God of more than one chance is able to bring Nigeria back to where he desired it from get-go. The same God that, because the harlot of Jericho took in those two spies, was able to unwind and transform her past, can change Nigeria because of you in this room. When character is lost, all is lost. And so, the focus on leadership, institutions, and culture will help us x-ray the role of the church in nation building and in our country. As a professor of economics at Princeton, who won the 2015, was it 14 Nobel Prize in Economics, called Angus Deaton. Angus Deaton wrote a book titled The Great Escape: Health, Wealth, and the Origins of Inequality. Central in his work to why nations are not equal. Some are prospering and some are failing. There's a role that education and healthcare play in separating people. And if you look at human history, education and healthcare have been most advanced by Christianity. Indeed, I go back to the very beginning where they were first called Christians in Antioch. Why were they so noted in Antioch that they were first called Christians then? Greco-Roman cities, and Antioch was the fourth largest Greco-Roman city in the world of that time, were very small, cramped in place because they were originally fortresses. And populations then piled into them. In the work, one of the ones I referred to here on the rise of Christianity by Stack. Rodney Stack makes the point that Antioch was probably not more than 1 mile square, and 150,000 people lived in it. So you can imagine the conditions of life inside Antioch. And these followers of Jesus were able to reorient the culture, reorient society, that progress could take place inside of it. That's what made them visible. That is why they were called Christians for the first time in Antioch. That leaven of society, that salt of the earth, that light of the world that the Christian is what it must continue to be for our country to make the progress that it should make. And so, even I, and all these amazing people, whether it's the historian Neil Ferguson, or the economists, and all of them who were talking about how human beings made progress. Civilization, the West versus the rest. Neil Ferguson's great thesis about how the West separated from the rest of the world. They have emphasized institutions. All those other studies. I thought, me too, I should say my own. Waiting. Only there go they talk. And so I wrote a book, Why Nations Are Poor, in 2016. That book had as the key variables that determine advance and poverty, policy choice. The kind of policy choices that you make as a society can determine how far you go. One of the grave tragedies of our country, kind of policy choices that we have made. Professor Ubu sitting here. He and I have had plenty of conversations about stuff like that. Back in the 80s, when we had this logjam that we had gotten into, policy logjam, foreign countries or foreign banks were refusing to extend lines of credit to Nigerian banks. Everything was suddenly locked up. And we had no choice, nowhere to go. The only thing we could do is agree to views expressed in Washington about how we should function. They would take IMF loan. People said, no! Some ideological economists who didn't think through the general implication of where we were. We were locked up. We were locked in. A few years before that, Nigeria had so much money coming from oil after the Arab-Israeli Yom Kippur War and all of that. And all this money, along with all the other monies that came to many of the oil-producing countries, well, in Western banks, these Wall Street banks had so much of these monies. They began to tell us that we were under-borrowed. They needed to recycle the petrodollars in their vaults Say, you're on Dabo Road. Obasanjo was head of state at the time. And he had one general called James Oluleye as finance minister, or commissioner as we call them. And Oluleye was sent off to go for jumbo loans. He went to borrowed all the jumbo loans, the way we are borrowing now. And before you knew it, we were in a debt trap. There's a lady called Cheryl Payer who wrote a book, The Debt Trap. We were in a debt trap. And we couldn't do anything. So what to do? We had to submit to some kind of IMF, whether World Bank called structural adjustment programs, because we made the wrong policy choices. And as we began to go down that track, it was clear, and Osita Obu here talks so much about how a local intelligentsia can, Osita, how do you put that thing again? When they become the ones who make decisions, we had all kinds of advice from Washington that destroyed the strongest things we had, like our educational system, in the name of structural adjustment program. And we've not stopped paying the price of it. And I tell the story all the time. I went to the World Bank annual meeting in Hong Kong in 1997, first week of October 1997. Because I flew from there to Kuala Lumpur, spent a little time in Bank Negara, their central bank, because they were having the Asian financial crisis. The Prime Minister of Malaysia, Mahathir bin Mohamad, refused to accept the advice of Washington. His deputy, Anwar Ibrahim, was favored. He was the one saying, yes, no, we should do what Washington says we should do. And by the time I left Malaysia and went to Jakarta in Indonesia, entered my hotel room, there were two magazines on my hotel room, Time, Newsweek. One of them had Anwar Ibrahim on the cover. And I said, the West has done it again. You're trying to push Anwar as the man. I brought down my laptop, wrote a story, which was immediately faxed to the Guardian. It was published in the Guardian. Anybody who can do research, go back to October 1997. You will see a story in the Guardian that I wrote titled, The End of Anwar. A few months later, Anwar Ibrahim was accused of sodomy, removed as deputy prime minister, and sent to jail. But what is important in this story is that Mahathir pushed his own set of policies, and Malaysia was the first country to escape the Asian financial crisis. A few years later, the IMF agreed that Mahathir's policy options were better than the ones they were offering from Washington. We should begin to develop that local intellectual capital to do the things that we should do in the interest of our country. Because when they tell you in Abuja, tax, that this is it, debt equity, debt to tax ratio, blah, blah, blah. We're back to Washington telling us what they don't understand about us. Anyway, I wasn't going to go there. Just to mention a little bit about policy choice and the trouble I tried to make in that book. Institutions, of course, agreeing with them all is so critical. Then human capital. And when I turned to Angus Deaton, I was talking about human capital. Education, healthcare, that's central to progress. Entrepreneurship. Unless you create value, human advance is not going to take place. So entrepreneurship is very critical. And there is culture, because values shape human progress. And ultimately, if you see the structure of this framework, leadership is at the core. It affects culture, and culture affects everything. And that's how man makes progress. So, how has the church helped us in dealing with the three critical issues that we have tried to highlight from that framework? If you go back to the writings of people like Max Weber and all of that on how America rose. The Puritan ethic, the work ethic. Now, one of the reasons that the church has helped countries that succeed understand the value of work is that you go to Genesis 2:15. Genesis 2:15 basically is saying to us that God put us there to take dominion and essentially become co-creators with him, bringing creation towards his perfection. That's the purpose of why God planted us here. We did not begin to walk because man fell, because of sin. God intended us to have dominion, to be entrepreneurs, to be value creators from the very, very beginning. And the Christian ethic, people like Max Weber will tell you, in fact, in criticism of Catholicism, that it was the Protestant ethic, the Puritan ethic, and its focus on work that grew America. Delayed gratification. It's culture. People want instant gratification. Cheat your neighbor, do anything, just get it. The greater is the delayed gratification. That is a basic value that the nature of what Christianity advocates helps do for nations to make progress. And then there's, of course, what I like to call the converse of the two publics. In 1975, a Nigerian economist, political scientist, and sociologist, a man called Peter Eke, who at that time was head of the Department of Political Science at the University of Ibadan, wrote one of the most profound essays that ever come out of Nigerian political science. It was titled Colonialism and the Two Publics. Peter Eke's thesis basically tries to explain why corruption began to grow in our society the way it is. And the basic thesis is that Western civilization creates a culture, one public. And that one public usually is the effect of Christianity, the public morality. If you steal government money, it is wrong. That is what you are taught at home. You slap your neighbor, it is wrong. You do this, you do that, you do. But Peter Eke argues that colonialism fractured the thinking about publics in the sense that we now have, of colonized Africans, a parochial public, their original culture. Where you see a man, you were there that time in Ibadan. Ambassador Keshi, I'm looking at her. You see a man, and he is his village association treasurer. He would not even think of taking 1 naira from the till because he knows what will follow him because if he did that. In fact, a friend of mine at his wife's 70th birthday last Sunday, Lawal Sholari, to tell a story about how in 1950, 3 or 4, some guy living next to them in Shagamu, suddenly nobody was talking to them, but being ostracized. What have we done? You go to somebody's house, the person will lock your door. Say, what have we done? Eventually, they heard the story. After more than 1 month of these people being ostracized, that a policeman was seen knocking on their door one early morning around 5 a.m. And those thieves, they turns out that a cousin of theirs who was a policeman from Kano arrived with night bus and came to knock on their. They had to start going around town. No, it's our cousin. No, we didn't do anything. That was the nature of public morality. One public. But you see, with colonialism and this oppressor against society, people developed a different attitude to the other public. And so the man who would not steal 1 kobo from his village will become permanent secretary and carry the entire treasury and come back, and people will have a party to celebrate him. And so It is the church, more than any other institution, that can help us recreate one morality rather than two moralities that govern the context of our society. And in saying this, it's important to note, Jared Diamond is a professor at Columbia. He's written a couple of extraordinarily brilliant books, two of which, one is Guns, Gems, and Steel, that explains human civilization and how it really took place. And the other one is titled Collapse, How Societies Have Failed Through Human History. The central reason societies fail is the failure of their value system. Culture shapes human progress. And as we know that the church is the base of human formation, we know the importance of that. And just to go on to show how the church has affected human history. There's a professor called Thomas Woods. He's written this book that you can see there, How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. And the title chapters tell the story of how things evolved. The indispensable church, a light in darkness, how the monks saved civilization, the church and the, well, that's been skipped. Anyway, but those were the titles of the chapters in his book. Now, as Stark, who I mentioned earlier, I was trying to explain how this small sect, he didn't want to take it from a Christian or faith perspective. He just wanted us to look at how a sociologist would reconstruct human history. Not, okay, faith or anything. No, just sociologist's reconstruction of human history. And essentially, the church, because of the way that it put the care for others, made human life sacred in the thinking of society. Because in those days, your neighbor looks for your thing. You cut off his neck, take his thing. But the church changed those value systems. And in changing those value systems, made it easy for people to trust that they can engage in business transactions with their neighbors and stuff like that. And they basically changed the shape of human history. So why did things reverse in our country? How did we get to where we are? The purpose of the church is to change culture, affect culture. But what is the culture that we see today, even in the church? What is the culture that we see? And Jesus is coming for a bride, a church without spots and wrinkles. But the church cannot speak truth to power. All the horrible, wicked, evil people who want to govern go before a pastor and they get anointed. Justice is central to the Christian ethic. We live in a country that is unjust. In so many ways, Nigeria is an unjust place to live in. I can say boldly that there are more innocent people in prison in Nigeria. The people who put them in prison are the ones who often should be the ones inside prison. So our society is one in which the norm has become right, might is right. Who can change that? But the church. Has the church failed in its duty in Nigeria? The church has its human elements. We will go through trials and tribulations. But we know, we are assured, we're told this in John 16:33, be of good cheer, for I have overcome the world. He has overcome the world, and so we should have Faith. That as Christians, we can truly be salt of the earth, that we can change things. I remember, because I was there physically, under Abacha. Everybody was scared. Everybody was afraid. Schools, people, the church was afraid. Pastors were afraid. Bishops were afraid. Everybody was. And John Paul II came to visit Nigeria. And as he was walking into his plane in Abuja after meeting Abacha, got to the door, he turned around, he looked at the bishops, and I said, I was there. And he said, and by the way, that morning, the Vanguard, I recall, had a banner headline, Pope, our last hope. He said to the bishops, you have not been left the spirit of timidity. That was his last word. He turned back, entered the plane. A few weeks later, Abacha was dead. I'm not saying you should pray anybody to death. I am just saying that you can form people and shape culture to leave a Christian flavor on the land. And that aroma, that incense, will transform our society. And the question is, how are you carrying out your role? Let me go towards the closing. Using River State as a classic example. I love that song, Port Harcourt Boys, you know. But Port Harcourt Boys are bringing Nigeria to a ruin. Is the church not present in Port Harcourt? Tell them that I say Port Harcourt Boys are bringing Nigeria to a ruin. They are damaging Nigerian institutions, the judiciary, the Electoral Commission, all those institutions that provide the pillars that society stand up are being cracked by a narcissistic, self-loving political class that do not think about tomorrow. Where did they get their formation? Where are their pastors? Where are those who should be saying, this is not right? I leave you to reflect, and thank you, and God bless you.
Please, one more time, a round of applause for the Professor Batitomi. Thank you very much. At this time, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to let you know that we'll be getting into another segment that is very exciting, the panel discussion. But before then, please permit me for something very special and short. Let me welcome Pastor Glory.
You know, earlier I said I was chatting with Ugo. So I sent your flight ticket. I said, this is for Papa. February 6th, Professor Patutomi turned 70 years younger. So we just want to quickly use this window of time to join Reverend Chris and Dr. Stephanie to celebrate Professor Patutomi at 70. Please bring the cake. Professor, you will be cutting the cake. Please, can we echo happy birthday to our great professor? Protocol, let's move this podium. I think we are okay with this. Let's remove this. Papa at 70. So we will invite Professor Patutomi, Dr. Chris OARHE, and Dr. Stephanie OARHE to join him.
Happy birthday.
Let's give Professor Patutomi a shout.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy
Dr.
birthday.
Jude Moyen, please.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you.
Let's invite Dr. Jude Moyen to supervise this. Please take the mic.
Why are you taking me unawares? Anyway, it's good for me because I'm looking forward to also 70, 80, 90, and then 100. Okay, sir. Congratulations, sir. We're going to spell Jesus, and then you just got the cake. So just join me. Please give me J. Give me E. Give me S. And then give me U. And then give me the last S. Thank you. Thank you.
We are saying we love you. God's love for you, it will overwhelm you. We are saying well done. Hip, hip, hip.
Mr. Charles, please.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot have enough of this birthday celebration, but thank God we're here. Before we get into the discussion proper, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to invite for a spoken word. She's a poet, so spoken word poetry. She is known as Dara Speaks. Please, can somebody bring that stand, the mic with the stand, so she can? Would you be there? Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this beautiful lady will be presenting. Are you ready? Please, a round of applause for Dara Speaks.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the name of the Lord. It's such an honor to be here this afternoon. I don't take this for granted. Thank you so much. Happy birthday, Daddy. You see, some will arise to open their eyes, to see through the lies, to turn from foolish to wise. Some would choose to reject the truth, the good news, to still stumble and snooze, and it will be theirs to lose. The fact you're in church doesn't make you a Christian. The fact you know all the hymns doesn't mean you know Him. Wake up from your sleep. Take off every religious makeup, because you serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The church building is holy, yes. Dedicated to God, yes. Sanctified with His presence, yes. But it does you no good if the most important thing, the kingdom of heaven within you, is missing. You see, we rent and buy buildings with the capacity of people to fit in it, but right now we are forced to have a city without walls. The church is not a system, it's a place where you can host and contact God. The church is not a building, it's where you find God. The church is you. Fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, insisting on the good of others, hands lending hands, feet washing feet, shoulders shouldering burdens to strengthen one another. Upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail. The rock wasn't Peter, the rock is the truth, which is him. But you see, the truth is we now have more members and less believers. We have more administration and less prayer. We have more flesh and less spirit. We are too busy working for the Lord and forgetting the Lord of the work. The cross is not a joke, it's a burden that you carry. The cross is not a scam, it's a place of sacrifice that needs a lamb. In Port Harcourt, we say there's no need to machala. People they grace for Instagram, but you see the end is near, and our banner should be clear. It's time for God's word to go viral with the sound of his invitation resounding through generations, rebounding hearts in separation. I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of God to save all that believe. So brethren, the die is cast, because the King is coming in glory and in majesty, and every eyes will see the King. But will you be ready in glory and in majesty? You see, every eyes will see the King. I dare you to labor with the power of his grace. Don't show up, don't give up, don't shut up until you have stayed up, prayed up, and spoken up for the cause of Christ. We are placed and sent to seasons beyond pulpits, into the classrooms, into the courtrooms, into the marketplace, into government houses. A nation is not built only by policy or politics. It's built by character, it's built by the church, it's built by you. God bless you.
She is Dara Speaks. Please, one more time. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we're about to get into one other very important thing. The panel session. But for now, let me recognize, as this event was going on, as the professor was giving his keynote address, people very important also worked in. I'm telling you that we have the General Overseer of the Gateway International Church, Reverend George Zuma, is in the house. Welcome, sir. We have Pastor Folami Famimi. It's good to have you in the house. You're welcome, sir. We also have Dr. Mrs. Iyala Yerin Laimi. We have Pastor Ken Ajibade in the house. Good to see you, sir. At least I have a black of your type of hat. I didn't know. Thank you. I know your wife is beautiful. She's somewhere. God bless you all. Ladies and gentlemen, we have Dr. Henry Malkai. He is representing the Vice Chancellor of the Ignatius Ajiru University of Education, Assistant Dean, Student Affairs. Good to have you in the house. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to let you know that this time you can see the stage is set for this panel session. And I would like to, before I invite the moderator, please, I would say and suggest that you listen attentively and write down maybe a question, just one, because after that time, we'll field questions from you, a few of them. I will be there by that time to help coordinate that. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, please, to take us to a whole new level, let me welcome for this segment the moderator is no other than Professor Franklin N. Ngu, the Lagos Business School. Please put your hands together for him.
I think it's already afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone. And I'm sure you noticed that when the spoken words, the lady that gave the spoken words, she kept quiet for a few seconds. And I was wondering what she was doing. I noticed, I believe, as she was getting spiritual guidance on what she wanted to do. So, when I sat down here, I waited for a few seconds to get my own spiritual guidance. But I think I've received it. And it's a good message, that it will be a good session. But of course, we all agree that the keynote speaker is, when they asked me to send the profiles of the keynote speaker and the panel members, I remembered somebody, a professor, that I asked to send his profile for an appointment. He said I should come and take it. So when I got to his office, he said I should sit down, and I sat down. He said that there are some people you don't ask for their profiles, because their profiles. Anyway, he asked me a question. He said, did I understand what they asked me to do? I said, yes, that they said I should get your profile. He said, maybe the people that sent you didn't understand what they sent you to do. And I said, why? He said, because some people, that you don't ask them for their profiles, because their profiles are already public knowledge. And I'm sure you will agree with me that our keynote speaker, his profile is a public knowledge. And even before he was born, he was associated with Port Harcourt. Because in 1929, a house was built, and it was known in the spiritual realm that he would visit the house. And our other panel members are also, their profiles are public knowledge. I'm not sure I should ask Mr. Frank Nweke Jr. You know, the way he was changing ministries during Obasanjo's regime, you'll be wondering what is going on. So he's well known. Or should I talk about Professor Osito Ogbo, who was the Chief Economic Advisor and later Minister of National Planning? Or is it Ambassador Joe Keshi, who I'm sure that many of you know, not only that he was his career for so many years, but also for his repeated desire, determination for a better Nigeria. Sometimes something will happen in Nigeria, Ambassador will call me, and we'll be talking for 40 minutes. I'll be wondering, is he talking to the people with the government, or does he know that he's talking to me, only me alone? Because you can see his passion, you can see his anger about certain things in Nigeria. And when you tune to channels, Arise, AIT, he's always there telling us that Nigeria should be a better place. Or is it our own mother in Port Harcourt, who, I will talk about it shortly, Professor Edwina Ama of University of Port Harcourt. But let me say that the reason why all of us agreed to come here, two reasons. One is because of the celebrant. Let me say that when I was called for this to happen, I said that he should give me a few that I will call back. So I went, I was using my mobile phone, I was using my laptop, I was searching. I will change the keynote. I say, bring the bad things about Professor Chris OARHE on internet. And I will search, click Google page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. I didn't see anything. I will change it. I will put another synonym of bad words. And I kept searching. When I finished searching, I started searching for Dr. Stephen about the wife. I started searching and searching. I now started calling people in Port Harcourt. I said, do you have anything about that man, bad thing about him? And I searched and searched. I didn't get anyone. The keynote speaker said that when character is lost, everything is lost. All the panel members, we check their character, and they all have excellent and confirmed good character. And that is why they agreed to come here, because they believe that what we are doing is something that is of immense and central importance to Nigeria. The role of the church in nation building. I was with some religious leaders last week in Abuja, and we all agreed that Nigeria, we are now more or less a sea of moral turpitude. Everything just goes, and which the keynote speaker already also affirmed. And we are now asking, how can the church become the different parishes, different denominations, become islands of moral rectitude? How can we know that in Hilltop that you are preaching the same message, that we have the same value, that we have the same character? And when we go to Warri, when we go to Benin, when we go to Kwara, Sokoto, Kano, Enugu, that is the same message, the same character, the same value, the same culture. And that means that when all of you becomes islands of moral rectitude, collectively, we will turn Nigeria from being a sea of moral turpitude to a sea of moral turpitude. Sorry, a sea of moral rectitude. And that's the reason why we are here. This topic is something that we are supposed to be having, I think, every month, because of the way the country is going. I also think that is a topic that we are supposed to be having in nursery school, in primary school, in secondary school, and in the university and tertiary institutions. Because, sincerely speaking, Nigeria, as Professor Utomi stated, and we all know, we are not doing well. I was in South Africa for a conference, and somebody asked Nigeria, the giant of Africa, he said that we have 4 levels of industrialization. We have 4th industrial revolution, we have 3rd, we have 2nd, and we have the 1st. And they now asked, what level do we think that Nigeria is? And I'm sure you know the answer. They say that Nigeria is yet to start the 1st industrial revolution. And the question is it supposed to be so? And then, in all indices of socio-economic development, poverty, unemployment, productivity, education, health, HDI, that's Human Development Index, we are not doing well. And when you look at the role of the church in nation building, it covers all these areas. So the question is that somebody asked me, when I told him I'm coming to Port Harcourt, they said I should ask, how come that the number of churches in Nigeria is increasing, but the moral decadence is also increasing? That it means that the church is not really living true to its responsibility. And that the key one is that the church seems to not appreciate the moral authority that they have. Because when you stand on the pulpit, people listen to you. So, and that's why we've assembled all the keynote, all the panel members to come here to help us to understand what can we do differently. In strategy, we normally ask 3 key questions. Where are we now? where do we want to go, and how do we get there? In Nigeria, we know where we are. We also know where we want to be. Somehow, some people don't believe. But the question is, how do we get there? And on that note, let me invite our panel members, Professor Osita Obu, who you all know, as I said before, former Chief Economic Advisor, National Planning Minister, Director of so many things. Thank you. He has just written a book which we're going to talk about. He called it Development as Attitude. I'm sure you know attitude and character, they are synonyms. Let me also invite, as I said earlier on, anytime I tell him to do something, I will say, we have your picture. He said, no, don't use that picture. I will send you the current one. And I'm sure you understand. He's always looking young, but he has intentionally left beards to Mr. Frank Wenke Jr., former minister. And our mother, who has been, when I went through her profile, it was exciting, highly commendable. And I checked through and asked her as well, and they told me that she's, we have Daddy Gio, and you have Mommy Gio. She's a professor, and Mommy Gio, Professor Edwina Ama. And the last but not the least, as I said, he's very committed and passionate about Nigeria. He's retired, but he's not tired. He's always working very hard about Nigeria. If you tell him that there's a meeting in Lagos tomorrow about Nigeria, he will buy ticket and come. And you tell him that he's in Enugu the next day, he will also show up. Even considering the different challenges and issues that he will go through. Ambassador Joe Keshi, thank you. So I'm sure you will agree with me that we've assembled the best. Let me also say that given the powers that I have been given as the moderator of this session, I have that authority and power to invite anybody I want to invite and ask anybody I want to ask to contribute to a question. So Professor Utomi, I can invite you. And you have to answer. So let me start with Professor Ositobu. You can see that Professor Utomi said that when character is lost, everything is lost. In your book, you talked about development as attitude. If you look at the church today, as I said, the number of churches in Nigeria is exponentially growing. However, our moral decadence is also exponentially increasing. So do you think that the church has failed in its responsibility for nation building from your own assessment?
Thank you very much. First of all, let me say how pleased I am to be here and thank the organizers for inviting me. Pastor Chris, happy birthday. I also heard from the grapevine that it may have been your wedding anniversary as well. So happy wedding anniversary. We are pleased to be here, and we thank God for your lives. Mr. Moderator with authority, permit me. You know, a certain tradition, we know we're talking about culture, values, and systems. A few minutes ago, we just established one culture, value, and system. A birthday cake. Pastor, don't go. A birthday cake of a 70th birthday of Patu Tommy. Next year, I will be 70. And what is good for the geese
It's good for the gander.
I want to return here because values shape nations.
Yes.
And we have established a certain value and culture.
Which we have to sustain.
Madam, please make note that I must be invited back and a certain birthday cake presented. And all of you are my witness. Having said that, Pastor Tony also referenced me a couple of times, and I think I should start there before I answer your question. When he was speaking about knowledge dependence, that we think there are people out there who have the solutions to our problems. Many, many years ago, you know, many of us are in the international circle. We travel, we speak. I was at a conference in Kenya, and I have seen things. I used to work at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. I also left because ideologically it's not an easy place to fit in, because people do not know that knowledge has value content. When people say this is a fact, where was it cooked? And who cooked it? So I teach my students to challenge what people call fact. Or sometimes they say stylized fact. It's already known. Known by whom? Created by whom? If you go to Washington, D.C., the Republican president will take advice from a conservative think tank called the Heritage Foundation. The Democratic president will take advice from the Brookings Institution because he's a liberal think tank. If knowledge was knowledge, why is it that different presidents are seeking knowledge from different think tanks? Does that not tell you that knowledge in itself has ideology embedded in it? So when people come and we make a distinction between knowledge and understanding. You can have knowledge, but you may not have understanding. It is the absence of understanding that made a very bright Washington economist to go to a rural place in Africa. I met a farmer who was rearing sheep and said, oh, I've done the modeling. If you do this and do that, your goat will multiply by X amount, and so on and so forth. The old, not very knowledgeable farmer was watching this young man pressing button on the computer. And when he finished, he simply said, all you have said cannot make sense. I don't have goats, I have sheep. The knowledge man did not know the difference between a goat and a sheep. So when people fly in and say, remove subsidy, they may have knowledge, but they lack what? Understanding. And that's why we say partial solutions may be more dangerous than no solution. Because you've not taken the totality of the system, the culture, the belief. You know, fuel subsidy had issues. The issue was not the subsidy itself, it was the management of the subsidy. And so we could have dealt with that issue. Because if minimum wage is 70 naira, 70,000, you understand that there's nowhere in the world that can help anybody to do anything. So we must be careful. The second aspect I thought Professor Tommy was referring to is in 2007, as those of us who are technocrats were getting into politics, I coined a term called techno-politician. That we need politicians with technical skills. Professor Tommy, I've modified it now because I forgot the third most essential leg, which is ethics. So it is not just politicians with technical skills, it's politicians with technical skills and with ethics. If you don't have these three, we can't go far. Returning to your question, you know, there's a difference between personal morality and public ethics. I think those of you who are pastors here, who are religious leaders, will pay attention that sometimes we over-preach the personal morality and forget the public ethics, the civic ethics, the economic ethics of how to handle resources, how to shepherd resources, how to make resources grow, and dignity in labor, and the things that come with them, which might explain just one aspect of why we will have multiplicity of religious institutions, but our civic ethics is going down. We are having leaders that are not grounded in the philosophy of governance. By the way, let's be careful, and those of you who are in Lagos Business School, you know this better. The people we're referring to as leaders are actually rulers. There is a clear definition of leadership. And so when somebody says even servant leader, I say no, a leader by definition is a servant. Leaders are supposed to eat last, not eat first. What we have had are rulers. Like you've had traditional rulers, what I say is what obtains. Rule by law, not rule of law. Rule by law is I am not subject to that rule if I'm the ruler. Rule of law is all of us are subject to that law. Clear distinction. Which one are we practicing? I am above the law. You know, it was in France, I've forgotten who said, I am the state. So, what are you telling me? I sat in an audience where a governor said, who is carrying the palm front is the person that the goat follows. Do you people understand that? He who is carrying the palm front, the goats follow. And then he said, right now, I am the one carrying it. And all of us, goats must. And so I asked the question, where is our character? How do we interrogate the guy carrying the palm front? You know that palm front might be your last supper, but you don't know. So, religiosity is increasing because of also the other point Prof make, the absence of prophetic voice. Speaking truth to power. I was in a funeral in a Catholic church. And this pastor was going all criticizing all politicians. Going off until one major senior government official walked into the church And he said, today our church is blessed. You see, this church, we are trying to finish it. We have not finished. I'm like, am I hearing right? Just a few minutes ago, you were railing on public officials and corruption. Suddenly, somebody walks in. So, think about Desmond Tutu. Think about Martin Luther King Jr. Those who speak truth to power. We are missing that. Third point. There is a gap in identity. People like to call themselves Christians. But to be a Christian is to be Christ-like. And it's very difficult. And so we like the identity, but we don't want the things that come with it. So identity of a Christian makes us go to church every day, maybe even pay our tithe. But the ethics that comes, the difficulty, the pain of being a Christian, we are not willing to do. And so this is what permeates the society. And you begin to have that divergence between the fact that there are many churches and there are very few Christians. Finally, on character. Character is really the act of doing the right things all the time. This definition is very difficult. When we teach some of these things, I tell my students, whether it is in a leadership class, I say, we're not asking you to score 100% on character. But after this lecture, can we raise it from 30 to 50? From 50 to 70? Because I cannot sit here and tell you to do the right things all the time. And character also means you are willing to bear the cost of being a good person. Because it has cost. So, individuals, and that is why the church is so critical in shaping values, in shaping public ethics, in shaping the economic ethics, in converting rulers to leaders, so that they will understand that the essence of governance is actually the happiness of the people. And, it was the president of the United States, I remember his name. He said, governance has two elements. One, you must understand the object, which is how do I create happiness for the people? But he made a more important point for me. He said, you must also have the knowledge of the means. Even if you know, do you know how to? Which is why we say, if you're in public office, you then have to assemble people who have the knowledge of the means. Have I answered your question?
Thank you very much, Professor Wu, but I'm sure, he described himself as a techno-politician, so he technically and politically answered the question. He didn't answer it like, okay, he answered it like a Nigerian. So, Honorable Minister Frank Nweke, let me come to you. In a recent public launch, a bishop stated that Nigeria is bleeding from political interests mixed with religious manipulation. I hope we hear Nigeria is bleeding from political interests mixed with religious manipulations. And I was also at a gathering, and government officials actually said that they are very eager and hungry for the moral direction from the church. My question to you is, in practical terms, You've been in government. You are not in government now, but you've been on both sides. In 2023, you wanted to be the governor of Enugu State. So in practical terms, how can the church effectively restore this moral compass to influence policy and governance beyond mere rhetoric? Thank you.
You've pursued me to Port Harcourt. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much. You know, because of all the precedents that have been established, I would also not deviate that much. So I'm going to pause for a few minutes to get spiritual guidance. Yes, but Pastor OARHE and his dear wife, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And congratulations. You know, it was in September last year that I turned 60 myself. So maybe I know how it can be. Maybe if I won't be cheeky or stepping out of line so much, I'm happy in border. But I'm truly, truly honored to be here. And I want to preface my comments by saying that, you know, Professor Ngu would attest to how reluctant I was to actually come out here. But because of our relationship, you know, colleagues at the Lagos Business School, my dear, dear friend and confidant, he prevailed on me to do the same kind of thing that he did, which was to find out about this person. And I'm glad that upon some kind of cursory search, I also came out, you know, feeling that, yes, this is an individual, Pastor OARHE, that one should identify with. The other concern I had about coming here, and if you check the internet, you're not going to find too many places where I've spoken recently. And it's not because invites or invitations have not come. In fact, as recent as, I think it was Wednesday, I had a long conversation with a gentleman who lives in London. And in the prior 2 years, we had been engaged. He wants me to come and do this. I said, I'm tired. I am tired of talking. I am tired. And I made the point that I'm not so sure that the situation with our country is so much because we don't know what to do, or that we don't know the kind of people that can do it. It is a conscious and obsessive refusal to see the path, and then you find people who rather leave that path and enter the bush. It's there. And I said, I'm tired. I'm truly, truly tired. And as we began to exchange, you know, conversation on this, he said to me, well, this is about the church. This might provide a pathway. This might provide some light on how we can go about some of the things you're talking about. And I said, okay, fine, I will come. And you know, it's so funny because he made reference to my run in 2023 for the governorship of Enugu State. And as he asked that question, my mind quickly went back to a particular encounter I had with members of the Christian Association in Enugu. As is the norm when the season comes, all sorts of groups are inviting you. Come and explain yourself. The people in diaspora will call you. The professionals will call you. This community association will call you. This one will call you. Everybody. And you have to be very obedient too. If you're not obedient, they will say, this one, you're arrogant. Oh, they can't engage him. Oh, he's not accessible. But I came to this particular session with members of the Christian Association of Nigeria. And as we came in, there was some service finished, and this bishop was talking about morality in public office. about the importance of focusing on the people. This man, or this bishop, on that occasion, was talking about the deficits, very significant deficits in development in Enugu at the time. The sanitation within the city, the water situation, the security situation, the infrastructure situation. We listened to all that. And I said, oh, finally, some people are, at least they are focusing on the right things. And then it was time to engage us in this debate or interaction or whatever. And he asked different questions of different candidates that were there. About 3 or 4 of us were there. And he turned to me and he said to me, Minister, what will you do for the church? What will you do for the church? It's important that we know now, not when you people enter there now, you start speaking long grammar. This was his question to me. And I sat down there and I asked myself, how do you respond to this kind of question? Without being rude, without being condescending, and whilst also conveying meaning. And I said to him, my Lord Bishop, thank you so much. And I said to him that I was privileged to have listened to your sermon and that it gladdened my heart because the impression I had was that you were very much interested in the wholesome development of society, that you are looking for people of character, of capacity, and competence who will take the reins of government and cater to the people. And I said to him, I do know that, even without asking you, I know that this congregation, I'm sure you come under a lot of pressure from them when their wives give birth, or when there's a serious health challenge, or when there's a funeral, or when they need fees to be paid. I'm sure you're also worried when you drive out in the day or in the night about security. And I said to him, I would have thought my understanding is that these people that you were talking about are the church. And therefore, if the roads are fixed, if water runs, if the hospitals work, if the schools are effective and the teachers are there well paid and well trained, if the children are then grow up learning what they're supposed to learn, the church has been taken care of. And I will not tell you what then ensued, but this was the kind of conversation that a bishop actually engaged me in, or engaged us on. And so clearly, what it told me was that the clergy or the men of God appear to see themselves as different entities. And it goes back in a way, even if it is tangentially, to the concept of the two publics. Right? In a way, it goes back to the concept of the two publics. So you feel that I am here, and I'm a bishop, and as long as I'm able to meet my needs, or that my needs should be met in a special way, beyond that of the flock that have been entrusted to me. And therefore, if I'm okay, then it's fine. It's fine. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we know that largely speaking, this is the mindset. This is what happens in most denominations. This is what it is. You have situations where the clergy or the men of God live in opulence and absolute luxury, whilst the congregation live in poverty and penury, constantly being encouraged to pray. When the Bible, the gospel of Jesus Christ was very clear that it makes no sense for your brother to tell you that he's feeling cold, and you say, I'll pray for you, when you have a spare coat to give him. Or to say that I'm hungry, you say, don't worry, I'll pray for you. Come, let me bless you. Or you ask the hungry man to go and fast more. These things are very clear to my mind. And so for me, in order for the church, as represented by the church elite or the clergy, in order for them to regain any kind of moral authority, right, they must then really retrace their steps and go back, what was the original intent of God at the beginning for man, for the church? What was the original intent? Prof really elaborated on it clearly, so I'm not bore you further. But the individual believer and the body of Christ, as represented here this afternoon, for instance, we are, first of all, members of the church, then collectively we are the church. And unless we really go back to those first principles, being our brother's keeper, then the church cannot regain that moral authority. The church cannot be that compass that it was originally ordained to be. And, Pastor OARHE, I might ask you very quickly, when was the last time that any government official came to your service? But I can assure you that in the coming months, you're going to find a lot of people coming to visit you and telling you how wonderful you are. You know why? Because they recognize, right? They recognize the capacity you have to influence people sitting behind you, the people that listen to you. So the political class recognize the capacity of the church to actually direct the people, shape our thinking, and guide us on how we might go. But they only recognize it in seasons. So when the time comes, Pastor OARHE, my question to you will be, will you have the moral courage to say, we're happy to have you? But you know what? We would like to know about there are things to point out, you point out to them. Let me not teach you how to do your job. But I'm sure you know what to do. Right? If you want, I don't know if you saw in the last few days a video clip that's been viral with Mehdi Hassan on the BBC. What's that program? You've seen it, right? You might need to go and prepare so that when we come, right, you are actually able to challenge us based on facts. Right? You're actually able to challenge us based on facts. That's the only way, in my view, Professor Ungu, that the church can regain its moral authority. Right? Something else that I want to add. You see, ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear. Neither a president, nor a governor, nor a minister, nor a commissioner, nor indeed any public official become kleptomaniacs or thieves when they get into office. A thieving governor or a thieving minister did not learn how to steal when he became minister. In other words, I'm asking us that in order for even the church, your church, our church, the body of Christ, to actually do what we're expected to do as Christians and as enunciated clearly in the Bible, we must go back to first principles. So that child that's been given to you by God, how much attention are you paying to his or her upbringing? And I've often shared my experience growing up with my late father. As a minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, he would write me letters, reminding me of the nurture that he gave me. And he didn't start writing the letters because I became minister. As a boy in secondary school, my father would write me letters. I have them. And because he wrote me letters, my own sons, my 3 sons, they suffer the same fate. I write them letters to remind them of certain values, to make certain demands, to demand accountability. I see my card drop something and I know I've provided for this. I'm calling him and saying, my friend, what did you just do with this now? Because I want to know. Because I know I need to teach him or them the value of money. No nation can develop by accident. No nation. Nothing can develop by accident. And I have made the point about the excellent service that one has received upon arriving in Port Harcourt yesterday, up till now. And I'm clear that whether it's the protocol guys, whether it's the drivers, whether it's the chaperones, whosoever is taking care of us, it was not because we were coming. I'm convinced in my heart that there's a culture, the kind of culture that Professor Wood spoke about, that's been established. That culture of excellence. That culture of excellence has been there. So it's not an accident. So it doesn't matter who comes. It doesn't matter who comes. That culture is there. Because somebody took it upon himself, or they took it upon themselves to say, no, this is the way it should be. Stick with it. My expectation then is that whether it is whether it's within the church, when even in their own homes, my expectation is that because of your influence, because of that influence, when they get home, I expect that they will maintain the same standard. And if they maintain the same standard, their children have no choice but to maintain the same standard. That is it. So, Prof, I will stop there for now and wait for your next one.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Let me, Professor, I don't know if I should call you Professor on this podium or Mommy G, or which one is. But I think you can combine the two. You know, just based on what Mr. Nweke said, remember that in 2023 elections, it's believed that the church was vociferous. They made a lot of you were hearing from, but some suddenly after the election, they seem to have been quiet. Not too quiet, not very vociferous. And there's been an issue in terms of subsequent follow-up on holding the government accountable for policy choices, policy promises, and all that. So the question is, why is there that gap in terms of pulpit promises? As he said, once a politician comes in here in some churches, he will even be invited to address the congregation. The secondly is then, how can the church move from reactive statements to a more institutionalized role in governance monitoring? Because from time to time, we hear that PFN had a conference and they've issued a communique. We hear that CAN has had a conference and they will issue a communique. But after that communique issued, we don't hear anything from CAN. Until something happens again, or until PFN will jump up again. But there is no systematic, structured way of engagement, of monitoring promises made even at the altar of God. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know you are speaking as a pastor and a professor now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I welcome you all. Happy birthday to Papa. And I'm highly privileged to be here. And I thank God for this opportunity. The organizers and all, I say thank you so much. Now coming to your question. The problem we have is that these politicians, you see them when they want something from you. Even ordinary calls, they call you when they want something from you. You try to call them, they don't pick the calls. Do I have a witness? In most cases, after that time, you call them, it's not there. They are not picking your call. In fact, the day I feared politician was when I met one, a family friend, and he was telling us how he went to a church and made promises of what to donate for a program or something. And then at the end of the day, that he was not going to do any of those things. And I was like, it's not as if he doesn't have the capacity, but that he knew from even when he was saying it, that he was not going to do it. That is the level we have gotten to. It's highly embarrassing and pathetic. So I have really been thinking while I was sitting down there, and I'm thinking that the only way we can actually hold them to order or call them to order or hold them to this thing is on our knees. There was a very prominent queen in England who said she doesn't fear anybody but the prayers of John Knox. So I'm thinking that we have to change our strategy. Because after they visit you and you pray for them or whatever, you don't see them again. Try to go and visit them. It's difficult for you to see them. In what platform are you going to hold them and begin to ask them questions? You came to my church, or during the campaign, you said you are going to do this, you are going to do that. How far? Where do you see them to ask them that question? It's difficult. I'm looking forward to a time when these people will fear God, the God we serve. So it is for us to pray on our knees. Whatever we want from them, God controls their hearts. It is not the ordinary people that they are. There is somebody that controls their life. So it is that God we should talk to do something about these people he has created that are from fooling and doing things that they are not supposed to do. I think God can answer our prayers in that direction as a church. Because it's enough of all this coming together, they should do this, they just look at us. Okay, looking at election, even that one, they come to your church to say this and that so that you will tell your members to vote for them. Does our vote really count? So where are we coming from? So I believe that the best way to hold them is through God. So that if they don't agree, God deals with them. So it is for us to pray and hand them over to God. This is what we want. This is what we want. And let God take it up from there. Because ordinarily, we cannot do anything. Somebody is telling you something else is in his mind to do. How do you handle it? So I think that is it. It's not as if the communique and all, those are just fulfilling righteousness. Just doing what we are supposed to do. But will they value it? They are not valuing it. They are not taking it serious. So by the time they know that there is one minister, there is another minister there that is watching them, and that if they pray to God and call them in the midnight, something will happen to them. They will be afraid. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sure we all agreed that she answered it as Mommy Gio. And we also remember that we are told that in the affairs of men, that God will always prevail. And somebody told me that, even when the leaders fail, where do we go to? We go to the church to pray to God. And even when the pastor fails, you go to God and go to another church again to pray for the pastor that failed as well. So ultimately, that the final is God. We know. However, we had a program and we had this many pastors. And somebody suggested that we should bring all the pastors in Nigeria and lock them in a room and tell them to start praying until all our problems are solved. So let me come to Ambassador Keshi. Ambassador Keshi, you've been around for so many years. You served the military and you served civilian administrations. And many people believe that during the military regime, that the church, that we saw courage, we saw determination from the church in calling and saying that some of the actions and inactions of the military government can be better. However, they believe that the church today seems, so the question is, does the church today wield the same kind of unifying and courageous influence as compared to that era? Or has its role changed? And what lessons from that period can be applied to the current period that we have now? Because as Mr. Nweke said, once election starts, once campaign starts, you will see all the politicians will be visiting all the churches. Some of them will go to 5 different churches in one single day. So what has happened? You know that military has violence, they have the arms. But now that their voice can be said to be more courageous during military regime, what has happened and what has changed? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Let me also start by joining to wish our esteemed celebrant happy birthday. And I join in praying that the good Lord will continue to strengthen you as you walk in his vineyard. Like everybody else here, I also took a look to find who you are when he told me. Oh, by the way, when the flyer was sent out, I called Prof. And I said, Prof, almost everybody on this flyer are the children of the Pope. You should have added somebody who is not from the Catholic faith, so that we all don't speak in defense of the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is one of the very good in defending itself. So I'm glad that Madame is here also with us. So thank you for coming. Let me say that what I found remarkable is your vision. And that, if I remember, is raising leaders and modeling Christ. If there is anything Nigeria needs today, is that sort of leadership. Because when Christ and his disciples were on their way to Jerusalem, the statement Christ made about service is the essence of Christian leadership. That is, leaders who serve the people, not the other way round. The second comment I want to make before I answer your question is, if you were a Catholic priest, I would ask you to receive the confession of Patutomi, because he fell into temptation. The depth of his lecture is an indication that he fell. And it's very clear. And of course, you don't blame him. If you've been in this country for 70 years, you will fall. It's as easy as that. Let me start by saying that I grew up in Ibadan. And in those days, there are three important personalities or groups that must never report you to your parents. They were the top of the society at that time. The first, the priest. Who will better you if the priest reports you to your parents? The second were the teachers. The teacher must not report you to your parents, because you'll be punished. That's just to give you an indication of what the society was like at that time. So when Pat says that maybe the colonial culture affected our culture, no. In sociology, there's still this debate about the influence of a stronger culture overwhelming a weak culture, which might be what we went through. Because growing up, to a large extent, our culture was still very strong. And that brings me to your question, what went wrong? In my view, I think that, look, the colonialists, going back to Professor Tommy's lecture on the colonial impact, the colonialists left us a very strong institution. And the first generation of civil servants were people who were trained in ethics, in culture, and in service. Pat will remember that a simple query by a permanent secretary led to the Prime Minister reshuffling his cabinet. And what was that? The minister took and his driver went to Abeokuta and came back, and the driver requested for some payment. And the permanent secretary was like, how? You took the vehicle, the government vehicle, you and the minister to Abeokuta. that was escalated to the Prime Minister's office, and the minister was removed. It will never happen today. It will never, never happen today. And so, for the first 6 years or up to the Civil War, the institutions that guided the states, they were very strong. You also had men and women in the civil service who were very well trained. I served in the diplomatic service. The first generation of the 12, we call them the 12 disciples, that built the service, the foreign service, for example. Look, they ended up all serving about 8-10 missions. But I have not seen their quality in the civil service today. But these were people who were trained by the colonial administration to take over the country post-independence. And I think, Prof, that things started going bad. One, with the military government taking over. Two, with the Civil War and what happened during the Civil War. And I give you a story with regard to culture and tradition and behavior. A young lady came home from Lagos and brought a car for the father to bless. It was a custom then. I don't know whether people still do it. And the father said, no. What exactly are you doing in Lagos? That you bought a car. And it was, no, that, you know, this noise and noise and noise. The neighbors got involved and said, bless this car for your daughter. God has been kind to her. And the man said, no. Let her tell me what exactly and how she bought this car. I'll tell you that that car was never blessed by the father. She went back very upset, and I'm not sure she kept in touch with the parents for a long, long time. Today, it's a complete different situation that we find ourselves. And that is the impact, to a large extent, the impact of the Civil War. And the fact that in an attempt to unify the country or to hold the country together, so many things went wrong in the execution of the war with regard to expenditure and the rest of it. And that's why we had the cement, crisis that yes, exactly. And subsequently from there, the successive civilian administration, who were relatively young, or some of them were not born before the end of colonialism, now thought that the culture that the military left behind was the right culture. And that's where we are till today. Let me also give you an example. To go to school, primary school, we have to pass the house of the premier, or who later became the leader of opposition, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. It's still there, a bungalow with a wooden gate, perpetually open. So we kids, coming back from school, there's a tap very close to so we go there and drink water. Nobody drove us away. This was a man who ruled the western region. When he's going to work, he goes to work almost 10 kilometers away from his house to Bodija. He goes to work in his car with a police orderly inside the car and one dispatch rider in front of the car. No more, no less. That state has been broken into 6 states. An average governor uses 15 vehicles. An average governor uses 15 vehicles. So make a comparison between what used to happen in the 60s and what is happening today. And you begin to see how we gradually degenerated. And everybody now believes that that is the right thing to do. You dare not tell a politician that they are wrong. Or you dare not tell or governors that they need to be conscious of the need to serve the people and moderate their lifestyles. And of course, you also know that from the governor's entourage, people in the private sectors, and by the way, including the pastors, have also joined in creating sirens all over the place. And that's how we got to where we are today. My major concern is I can't see a way out. I cannot see a way out. If there's going to be a way out, the church would have to help us. And that's because I hope the church can begin to change how it presents itself to the people and what the respective pastors say to the people. Because you see, most of the people do not even understand that we have a crisis. So the church would have to help us, make them understand that we have a crisis. My mind goes back to the speech by Mark Antony when Caesar was killed. For those who are as old as me and who have read Julius Caesar. Caesar was killed, according to the conspirators, because he was ambitious. And the people rejoiced and said, oh yes, he was ambitious. So it was okay for him to have been killed. But when Mark Antony pointed out to them that, listen, how can you say this man was ambitious? 3 times we offered him the crown. 3 times he rejected the crown. What was the reaction of the crowd? Come to think of it, that's true. He rejected the crown. But before then, it never occurred to them. How do they faith, the church, begin to help people to understand? Change the mindset. Let them understand that there is a crisis and they have to focus on those crises. When Mark Antony again told the crowd, we are talking of this same man that distinguished himself as a military general to save Rome. The people again came back and said, come to think of it, that was true. He won victories to save Rome. That was when they changed their mind, revolted, and what did they do? They went after the conspirators. I'm not advocating for violence or violent change, no. But I'm only saying that it's time the church begins to find a way to really reach the people, to make the people understand the crisis. Because look, when 9/11 happened, I was in the United States. I lived in the United States at that time. My house in West Spaces in Atlanta was barely 10 minutes to the church. So we could leave home 5 minutes to the church, to go to church on Sunday. When we get to the church, 2 minutes to 10 o'clock, when the service, a mass is supposed to start, we will still find a seat on the front row because the church was, But after 9/11, the first Sunday, we worship from the street. Because all those who did not believe in God before came back to church. But that's not what I want to say. The reason, because when people say the Americans do not pray, no, they do pray. The reason is that everything we are praying today as a prayer point, they have it. So, God gave us leaders. God gave us the faculty to do things and to improve our own society. God is not going to come down and do it for us. If we refuse to do it for ourselves, if we refuse to hold our leaders accountable, if we refuse to challenge our leaders and let them know that we elected them to serve us, and that we have enough resources to transform the lives of everybody in this country, and the church do not speak up, and the church do not help the people to understand that there's a crisis and that we need to find a way out, then I can assure you we'll be lost forever. But I sincerely hope that won't be the case. My advice is that, as of today, While the church of those days that Prof referred to, they were strong, they were courageous. And that's because the society has not come to this state. At that time, the Pentecostal movement has not started, so nobody was preaching prosperity. Nobody was preaching prosperity. But significantly, things have changed. And the church must return back to the teaching of Christ to begin to build leaders that can help create a new future. And that's where we end, sir, by saying, you've promised you're going to get out a couple of books. I sincerely hope you also do a book on leadership. Because if we do not bring up a new generation of leaders with a mindset of service, we'll be in trouble. Listen to the statements being made by politicians of today. It is for themselves. When a minister boasts that that today he's more powerful than he was when he was governor, that should be frightening to all of us. Well, it is true. That should be frightening to all of us. And I do not think anybody can stop these guys except the church join civil society to begin to impress upon the people, that look, pray as much as you want to, but the most important thing is be active in holding your government responsible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Keshi. I was trying to understand. You seem to be advocating so many things. You are telling the church to become more active. Yep. You are telling them to go and read Julius Caesar.
If they've not read it.
If they've not read it. Well, you know, most of the time, the church will say that their responsibility is to provide that prophetic voice. So I think it might be better, and Professor Tomi also mentioned it in his lecture. I think it might be better for me to ask him. Professor Tomi, you know, the question, based on what Professor Keshi said, this prophetic voice and getting more involved in politics, where should the line be? How can the church also use their prophetic voice to speak against injustice and corruption, but carefully avoiding partisan politics? Because even if, as you are aware, even in the church, in the Christendom, there's a level of divisions, you know, animosities, issues, that once one group goes in this direction, another group goes in this direction. And of course, they say, divided, we will fall. So how can they balance this, being that moral authority, prophetic voice, as well as avoiding not being involved in partisan politics? We've seen also church leaders who get involved in partisan politics, and sometimes it doesn't go well. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. I think that if you take even extant challenges, CAN is currently divided. There's an emerging northern that basically says that the southern CAN is not identifying with the struggle they are dealing with. And what it shows is that what matters is that we live principles. If those principles of the dignity of the human person get lived, and you will understand Paul's come over to Macedonia. Yes, they need help. Are they getting the help? But because it is getting political, it is partisan, and so they're not thinking like Christians. They're thinking like people of power in the South. And we are dealing with this, and they can't identify with it. This principles thing is so important, and it takes me an example I was going to give when I was remarking, but I was trying to round up very quickly. The power of personal example. All of us can make huge impact with lives we live. You know, the greatest gospel you can preach is the example of how you live. There are many people who will never be able to read the Bible, but they see you, they see something. And an example I use that it was a shock for me personally as a business leader many years ago, about 30 years ago, I was in the CEO position of a major multinational. And I was on the council of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I mean, that council, probably more than 50% of Nigeria's private sector GDP were present in that council. And one day, an NGO that was concerned about corruption wanted to come and make a presentation to the council. Vice President Oshibajo, in fact, my joke about that story usually starts with the organization Convention on Business Integrity was honoring some people about 20 years ago. And those on the honor list were Mr. Akintola Williams, Dr. Omolayole, Chief Ogubanjo, and so on and so forth. And then that was me. And as I was coming up, Jebi, as we used to call Yemi Oshibajo, said, "Come, how come everybody here is 30 years older than you, including those who have died?" You know, he was trying to make a joke of it. But I too then began to wonder, how did I get on this list? 30-something years ago, at this meeting of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, the Convention on Business Integrity came to say to business leaders, you know, we can make a huge dent on this corruption problem in Nigeria if business leaders came together in public and said, I will not give, I will not take, about corruption. Nobody will take, you won't give a bribe, you won't take a bribe. I thought it was a fantastic presentation. I was expecting the entire council to rise and say, yeah, we go. And then I looked right, looked left. There were only 3 hands up of the 60-something major business leaders in that room. One of them was managing director of Cadbury Nigeria PLC at the time, Dr. Christopher Kolade. The other one was a certain surveyor called Adekunle Kukoi. The third hand was mine. And this is not really where I am going. Where I'm going is that I was so shocked by that I started running towards the president, chairman of the council, who was usually very affective, very kind towards me, to say, Chief, he said to me, Pat, that was morality. This is business. Until all of us can begin to live a unity of life. The usher in church on Sunday, in the marketplace on Monday, same person. But when, okay, this is how you act as usher, and that's how you act in the market. And that's why Nigeria is where it is today.
Thank you, Prof. But I'm not sure. I think it's depressing, if I would say this, because we seem to be coming back to, we will uplift me, okay. I believe that when they bring Prof's birthday cake and share to all of us, we will all be uplifted. Because the way they took that birthday out, I'm wondering what happened to the birthday. Or is it birthday in the church? Maybe we're expecting the cake for the market. But let me bring it back. Pastor, I will have a question for you based on what they said. And also, I will throw it open to the audience to ask questions. But I wanted to come back to Professor Ositogbo. In terms of, you are very heavy with regards to stewardship and mentorship. You said that things don't happen by accident, which we've all Agreed. So how can the church teach principles of work, stewardship, and financial literacy to empower its members to become economically productive citizens? I think it's okay.
Thank you very much. First, we depress you and then we uplift you. There is an assumption we are making that the church as currently constituted, I think we have come across, we've spoken about this in circles, is actually ready to do what we are asking them to do. The church leadership in Nigeria needs value orientation itself. I don't know whether I'm making sense. Why are you guys not clapping then? In other words, we're making the assumption that the church leaders, as currently constituted, can deliver what we're asking them to deliver. Pastor, I think we don't need to bring the pastors and lock them in a room to pray. You need to bring them in a room and invite us back. So that we can now speak